we won't sweat the small stuff at all. It is no worry. And hey, Agile Bill, it's so good to see you. We are going to talk about games, by the way. I thought about you. Much of what we do is all about games.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Phelan. Okay, great. Just checking, you know me. And I was so sorry my microphone was burning hot last year. You know, you were so wonderful. I had a blast at the Thinkerers talk, and thank you again for that. I want to recommend to everyone that you enjoy the sessions and feel inspired, gather all the cool loot and ideas. And by the way, is this your first time at VWBPE? Is anyone here for the first time before we get started? Oh, it's so great. Please feel welcome. Hey, Vru. Please feel welcome to friend me if you so desire. You can always ask me for information, for contacts, for materials. I've taught 58 classes in virtual worlds, and I love it. You know.
Oh wow!
I'm totally a fangirl. This is my 343rd talk presenting these kinds of spaces, and Frankie and I have written several books together. We published 3 books, 3 book chapters, and over 50 papers as part of our group.
Yes, been a lot of fun.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, so I will turn it over to the team that's kicking us off. Maybe that's me, huh?
Oh.
I often moderate for myself. And the reason I do is because we're such an interesting group. I will check for just a moment. Yeah, I know. You was like, and so modest, too. Oh, we are. We love it. Are we ready to go? Let me just give a little shout out. I think we are. Okay, well, we'll get started. You know how educators are. We carve pathways, right? So I will be driving a speakeasy, but I'm going to give you a copy of my note card as well. Let's see where I put it. Here we go. So if you get distracted, have to leave or something, you can certainly use this. If you don't want it, you don't have to accept it. And of course, I will be talking off script too, because that's so me, right? And so let me get all the acceptances off and we will get started. Welcome to our session on uncommon, insightful thinking. We're following the conference theme here, but let's face it, we're all about learning through gaming, right? And we create games and we think about strategy and AI, and we think about VR and virtual worlds. We think about the human experience. But before we get started, I want to talk about our team. We are Virtual Harmony. We've been conducting research since 2008 together. Spinoza Quinnell is our mastermind, and of course he could not be here with us today. Interestingly enough, he's meeting with one of the gurus for the talk I'm giving today. So it's such an amazing opportunity for him. Frankie Antonelli, sitting next to me, has over 20 years of education support, and she manages a research team at University of Central Florida, and she does such amazing and inspiring things. She keeps us busy planning educational innovations. She first joined the project in 2010 when we won the $25,000 grand prize for the Mars expedition at Defense Game Tech. And we want to do a shout out to the Thinkerer, for VWBPE, who unfortunately passed away in 2021, our dear sister of the heart, Dr. Barbara Truman. She inspires us today, and she's always with us everywhere she goes. So please realize you may be gone, but never forgotten. And then there's me. I thought Frankie was going to drive these the speakeasy, but you know me. I'm a pencil pusher. I'm always taking charge. So I'm Cynthia Calongne. And I've been in Second Life since 2005, and I hit the floor running. I joined, I matched up with Corey Ito and Narmatur Pendragon from Electric Sheep and the New Media Consortium, and I've been, I took my first vacation in World and took 57 classes, and then I started creating content and bringing every class I taught in here to create projects and experiences and simulations and think about our world. I certainly volunteered with Peggy Sheehy's Ramapo project from 2007 to 2009, and we had 400 eighth graders each year, so there were over 800 of them, and they did most of their studies on a copy of the teen grid for that school district, okay? So we had 13-year-olds in World, and I was a mentor for them. And I learned to teach better. I teach doctoral students, graduate students, undergraduate, and of course, 13-year-olds. So it was a wonderful experience. I learned how to offer compelling discoveries in 40 minutes or less before the bell rings and they run down the hall to log in from the next class, because they were on campus logging in from their laptops into the virtual world. Now, our work would not be complete without thanking the librarian of Calongne, J.J. Drinkwater, who's our science fiction librarian and dear friend. Oops, and Frankie's clicking hers too. So we're still welcoming people who are joining us. That's okay. You have to realize I don't mind. And then Skylark, who's Andy's sister-in-law, who comes and play tests our stuff, because we need people who are not educators to keep us honest. And then Yubit Umarov, who's out here in the audience, he makes it all possible. He is our Open Simulator core developer, and we think in an integrated way between Second Life, OpenSim, and the world to characterize this metaverse. He helped us to upgrade our grid software, and of course keeps thinking about performance and how we can optimize our experiences both here and in OpenSim. I'm going to do a shout out for all his hard work. And then we'd like to also thank everyone on the core dev team. And I've given you their names. Every week they meet together and they're thinking about how to preserve the integrity of what we do in these spaces. And of course, I'll move out of the history and get to what is virtual harmony. Well, it's a place where we gather. We have over 16 grids. I'm looking at the grid map. It looks like we have 17 or more. And since this is an educational conference, I will, let's see if I can pull that up for you. And I'll give you a link to it so you can see what our grids are like. We're also here in Second Life as well. We have a presence everywhere. And so I teach my classes between worlds. And of course, today we're going to talk about the Matrix game, so I'll give you a link to that. But don't go playing because it's played in a virtual world. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about OpenAI in the sense of how we use AI for strategy. So I'm going to give you 3 links to kind of set aside and save for later or look at. The third link are a collection of templates that we've written, Dr. Stricker has written, that allow us to use DaVinci, the more robust form of ChatGPT, and in our analysis of complex strategies. In other words, we're not trying to cheat. We're instead trying to reflect on problems that are so complex there is no solution for them, or problems that are complicated and have a solution, but we don't know exactly how they work. Okay, so moving along. And I better click the slides too, hey? There we go. The project's a result of the work by our community, and of course we've named it in alignment with the conference theme, which is perfect for us because we think about uncommon, insightful thinking. That's our framework. And we design games for learning, but we don't just think of them as play. We think of them as explorations in deep, probing thought. And we're basing this on the Tolman model. So we're going to talk about what that means, if that's new to you. We're going to look at a link from Purdue OWL that talks about argumentative essays and how that maps to our game. Now, if you were thinking this was the Matrix, you know, as in the movie, you're in a big disappointment. This is about strategy, right? And what's interesting, though, is instead of talking about military strategy, we're going to talk about seeding wolves into communities. You know, the wolf here in the U.S. has almost become extinct because we've eradicated it in most communities. I learned this when I put a wolf in one of my fiction stories, and my writer critique group stopped me and said, no, you can't do that. There are no longer wolves. Well, we have them now. And in Colorado, we have 2 wolf preserves and, of course, wolf exhibits with the zoos. But now we're working on seeding them back into the wild. And this brings up a lot of questions, right? And so imagine that that we're taking it through all of this this opportunity. And by the way, here's our grid map. If you didn't look at the link, our grid map's constantly changing. There are like 21 grids, but who's counting, right? And we call them grids because we're running them in that architecture rather than as regions, okay? The reason we do that is we're running it all off of a Mac server, you know, with 32 gigabytes of RAM. And how can you keep them all online? And we don't. We keep about half of them online at any one time because let's face it, how many of them can we log into at the same moment? But we're always thinking about this. How can we extend our world and extend our technology? So what's the typical nature of problems and challenges? And by the way, Frankie, at any time you want to step in, and here's a very
Sure.
busy slide, certainly feel welcome to. And
Sure.
I'll give them a
Thank you.
link on this Tolman method to help out with that.
Okay. In this slide, really what we wanted to portray is the how we operate, how we go from, how do we use which model depending on what sort of topic we are trying to unravel, discern what the best options are, what are the consequences of our actions. And so the one on the left really is all about more of the simpler, more methodic type scenarios that we might deal with. And you see at the bottom where it says human controlled, and then on the more pink dotted area, that's where we would have AI or machine learning kind of enhancing or augmenting the human capability for discerning what we have at hand that we need to kind of decide what to do and what actions to take. The one on the right where it says a strategic context, that's pretty much our framework for when we are dealing with some of those wicked problems. You know, we used to hear that term a lot. But it seems like these days we deal with so many wicked problems. That's where our, leader, Andy Spinoza Quinnell, has been strategic in letting us adopt this matrix game concept and the Tolman's model for argumentative discourse. And again, you have the human component. What are the things that the humans are excellent at, capable at, and then how might we use AI and ML, which is the topic of the du jour, coffee du jour that we hear and read a lot these days in the newspapers, newsletters, and our colleagues.
Well, I'm going to jump in here on that one.
Sure.
Because, I wrote an AI course at the doctoral level, and it's a breadth of knowledge where we're exploring opportunities for AI to strengthen medicine and other disciplines, right? But I wasn't thinking about generative AI, and I wasn't thinking about tokenized AI. So last week, most of us write, is this correct, out here in the audience? I was writing a book chapter on deadline. I'd hurt my arm, the typical, I've waited to the last minute to do this, right? And I'm trying to organize my references because I noticed they're in 4th through 7th edition APA. And I thought, well, maybe I'll use these tools to organize my references, put them in the right format, and make it easy for me to be successful. And guess what? Can anyone tell me what happened when I entered a prompt asking for my references with Dr. Stricker's, in a certain genre with a certain focus, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I got as a result? Can you guess? And if you can't, do not stress, but I was shocked at the results. No one, none of them were accurate. None of them were accurate. I looked at it, and it was my name. They had grabbed my middle initial, which I do not publish under. It had constructed references, and all of them were fabricated. Has our audience heard that these generative AI systems fabricate references? If you haven't, it's a shock the first time it happens. Sheila. Yeah. And see, I was just thinking, I wasn't trying to create anything or cheat or anything. All I said was, give me the references for Cynthia, Calongne, and Andrew Stricker, because we have 51 papers out there. The odds are good that I should get a few references, right? And they're easily available on some of them on Google Scholar, on OrcID. They're verified. They're through academic sources. And I thought this is not a hard task. So it gives me 6 false ones, and they're from medical journals, and they're attributed to other people. Some of you in the audience may have authored some of the ones it said I authored, and I was so shocked. So I asked again. I said, I'm sorry, but those are all incorrect. They are not right. And it apologized to me very nicely for falsifying my references, and then gave me 5 more incorrect ones. And by then I was losing my temper a little, because the last thing I want to do is have the world think that I'm falsifying references to my work, right?
So scary.
It is a little scary. So that made me think. And I thought, okay, so what are the benefits of using... No, it did not correct. It made up 5 more incorrect references. And what's interesting is the title of the reference existed, but it was someone else's. One of them was a friend of mine. I'm not going to call them out. Another was the journal name, which did not publish that reference, that title. And then the third was the DOI number, which was inaccurate also. So the 3 pieces were from 3 different sources for every reference. And this taught me something right off the bat, to be a little more circumspect in how I trust the results from these creative tools, right? When they say generative, they do mean, using tokens to piece together the letters and words and symbols that frame a conversation that then bring you to some sort of discovery. But that discovery could be very creative and fiction. There's nothing that says it's not like a search engine where you ask for something, it does pattern matching and returns the correct value or the current. It's not passing what we call in education the crap test. And I just thought I'd mention this, especially if we're not on recording, right? Because that's currency, relevance, accuracy. And I know you're thinking picky, right? But as an educator, I would like to know that when I use these tools, that I'm getting useful information. But now let's take a step back, because I know Agile Bill's in the audience, and he knows that we're doing work. Yeah, I knew you were going to say something. We're doing work on complex problems. And you remember I said earlier, some of our complex problems do not have a solution. Let me move ahead so I don't take too long with the slides, right? And that way you can also read a little bit. I'll click the little thingy here. This was talking about what Frankie had just said, and I forgot to click. But the complex problems do not have a solution. And let's look at one. Oh, I'll talk about it while we're catching up with the old speakeasy. One of them is breathing on Mars. I'm going to interject that in typing. Breathing on Mars is a complex problem. We can't do it, right? Not easily, not without, first off, we can't get there, but secondly, once we're there, how will we live? So that's a complex problem that does not have a solution. And generative AI is ideal for exploring those kinds of solutions, because we can't just do pattern matching to from a question, a prompt to an answer, and expect to get to the result. So that's what I want you to understand here, is that we are thinking about chaos, a little bit of chaotic, no cause and effect. We might have some truly novel things occurring and that you have to respond to. And these may change the playing field for what you're doing. So while we often think of matrix games as a strategy game between 2 opposing forces, right? And of course, the first time I played it, those of you who know me know that I did Warhammer Fantasy, right? I did orcs versus elves. I did Lord of the Rings. Because I don't think about modern warfare. I think about historical or fantasy or things that, of course, take us into a different mind space and do not reflect on today's human condition. Okay? All right. So and these were notes from the slide that you might have had a hard time reading from those little bullet points. So here we are. We're caught up with our what is a matrix game. It's a challenge game. It uses words. This is why generative AI is our friend for this particular use. Once again, we're not trying to extract my references, right? So far, so good. And the challenge worlds presented by this game is described, we call it a matrix because of how the alternatives are structured, okay? There are 6 points to it that Tuleman talks about, and there's Team A, Team B, and an umpire. And I'll skip to the next slide so you can see a little more information about that. We're doing all of this in a virtual world. So we have constructed what looks like almost like a steampunk or Victorian library. You'll see images of it. And then this game is part of an interactive piece. And then we also have a map that you can stand on. And then I've recommended that parts of the map become 3D worlds that open up to us so that we can go inside and have adventures in these different areas. And this, of course, is a work in progress. We've been working on it now for about 6 months, in case you're wondering. And of course, we develop very quickly. We're using 6-sided die, but the game allows you to select. So if you're a D20 kind of player from role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, whatever game you love, right? Toon, Firefly, all of them, right? D20 games, yes. You can run it in any number of dice, but his default's a D6 because that's what we play with Monopoly and with traditional games that most people are familiar with, right? But of course, I like percentiles. This game strategy comes from the British Army. You may have seen it in movies where they're pushing around little models, little miniatures of things like forces, like Navy or Army or whatever. And they're pushing around with those sticks that look like billiard bridges, for getting a tough shot. Anyway, so here we're looking at the systems designed to support game playing between teams. And let's look at the model for a moment. This is the Tuleman model. I'll begin a little closer. And you will notice there's 6 elements about it. And if you think back to Purdue Owl, how many of you visit the Purdue Owl?
I haven't. Here's the link. Of
course, I gave you a little link to the Tuleman argument for it. And did you give him that again?
Yes, just in case.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. For anyone who's just joining us in progress. And by the way, we do have this script for you if you want it. And I will post these slides afterwards on slideshare.net/LearLobo. But anyway, you see here, you start with your evidence. Each team is presenting their evidence. They have opposing opinions, right? You have your thesis or claim where you think you're going. You have your rebuttal, right, the qualifiers. You keep modifying your thesis as you go. You have some implicit assumptions that you believe to be true. For example, if we were talking about putting wolves in your community, let's make it your community because then it gets personal, doesn't it? It's very easy for us to say, well, it's great to restore a species that's becoming extinct in our habitat, but it's very difficult to figure out where do we put them. And I've just brought up the model, so let's see. And every argument has 3 parts, just so you know. So if you're ever constructing this kind of game for yourself, you don't have to have all the interactive objects, and we have a data dashboard that collects all the data as people are playing it, and then so we can do further analysis and then also do some more AI analysis. Because remember, one of our goals is not just to play the game or have students think about what they're discovering as they play, but to harvest and identify new ways of solving problems that are very complex in the future. Okay, so we have these 3 parts, which is the claim, the grounds, and the warrant, which keeps changing it, keeps affecting it with new evidence, right? Okay. So here's our little way of thinking about the matrix game. And of course, those of you who know me, I love for my students to create experiences. They model in 3D in the virtual world, whether it's for 56 classes they did it, or 55 of them, they did it in Second Life. Now that some of them have done it in both worlds, and then the rest have been doing it in Open Simulator. And I often will use a room that's a little like the Star Trek Next Generation holodeck room, right? That little, the grid that you see there in the map. But it's this notion that everything's happening in 3D and everything is volatile. It's not static. It's not a perfect world, and the conditions keep changing. So you have to be very responsive to it. And of course, we have Team A, Team B, and the umpire. And we have some signage on the wall that allows virtual world players to interact with it, bring up some of the components, start filling in their responses, right, that go straight to our data dashboard, and then, of course, start playing the game. The Da Vinci, that's the more advanced form of ChatGPT 3.5, and I know 4 was just released. It's coming out to us. We've traditionally used the Red Queen as the metaphor for our AI system, and we've been working with AI for about 7 years now, maybe a little bit longer. Dr. Stricker writes a blog that, of course, goes to the Pentagon, to 129 members, and they've been reviewing it. They put our work under a classification recently, not the game and not the things we do with students, but the harvested scenarios that he's written. I felt a little like 3 Days of the Condor. Do you remember that old movie? In the beginning, they find a story that's too close to some real-world event, and they all get killed, except for Robert Redford. Of course, that didn't happen to us, but we're so fortunate to them because they're about to release a public version of some of the content that we've gathered over the time. And I say we, but let's face it, Andy Stricker, who is Spinoza Quinnell, is the mastermind of this work, and he inspires us and keeps us going. So let's talk about the AI piece for just a little bit. And you see these 4 templates. I'll turn it over to Frankie in just a moment. But see these 4 yellow shaded templates there? I gave you a link for where we have those. And if you scroll all the way down, I will paste the link again. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of this OpenAI page at our subdomain Harmony Arts, you will notice that there are 39 templates, but 4 of them we use in the game. So this is mapping the Da Vinci AI system to our game and to our dashboard. So there's this interaction between players in the virtual world, how they interact with this AI content, and then how they augment that experience, and then how we harvest and do data analytics on what they're doing so that we can discover opportunities that we just hadn't thought of. Now, how many of you are familiar with Foldit? And I will turn it back over to you, Frankie, I promise.
No, that's okay. You're doing great.
There's a game called Foldit. And could you grab the link for that for me, Frankie?
Sure. No problem.
It's a game out of the University of Washington. And if you're not familiar with it, in 2010, in about 2 to 3 weeks, gamers who played the game Foldit, which was a protein folding game, were able to solve the HIV protease in less than 2 to 3 weeks, a task that researchers were unable to do in 10 years. And there were many reasons for this. This is not to, cast any aspersions on the researchers by any means. But gamers do not recognize boundaries. The game may give them boundaries, but if you're playtesting something, you will try to exceed them. You won't worry about, this is how it's supposed to be played. No. Try whatever you can to get the mission accomplished. What's interesting about that is the people who played it were not necessarily experts in protein folding. Some could have been ages 6 through 72 or older. We didn't have boundaries. And when you put thousands of people against a problem and you don't have boundaries, you may make some discoveries you had not considered. And so that's part of our thinking here, is that while the AI can do some of that for us, we really need that human innovation of folks who do not follow that discipline, thinking and contributing ideas that may lead to some amazing discoveries. So I want you to realize that we're not just thinking about AI here. We're thinking about how important it is for the interaction of the player, the person, and the umpire, who also contributes and adds information and votes in, and also evaluates the logic. Because you just heard me say that I'm somewhat critical of generative AI when it comes to things that I believe lead to a conclusion, right? And so, Frankie, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, no, great. I think, well, for me anyways, personally, going through these experiences in the last 6 months, it has been more about how even more than before, it has always been, but even more than before, the all of us need to develop that critical eye towards what we're seeing. The tools that we are having access to these days, they are much more powerful than what we used to have before. And so how do we, Leah, kind of like you and I have talked in the past, like how do we help develop that level of literacy, critical thinking skills, knowing how to be an umpire, if you will, in many ways. Be able to assume the different roles in a game. The role-playing aspect of it, RPG, it is a great way for us to develop these abilities to discern what we are facing, what we're looking at, and not just take it for or how it is presented to us. Again, it goes back to what Tom was saying in the keynote this morning, right? Not necessary. Not everything is necessary. It's just knowing when to use what for which purpose. Yeah, I think that's what I would put. Oh, and I'll add another link here on RPG and Matrix games that I found kind of interesting and useful for some of the things that I'm going to be doing. And back to you, Leah.
Hey, thanks. And you can play Matrix games in the virtual world without having automated interactive devices or data analytics or ChatGPT or any of this stuff. You don't have to have all that stuff, or you can have students do a departure to it and bring back the results and then of course confer it. So please realize this is the type of game that anyone can play. And that's part of what makes it so interesting, right?
Yes,
so let's see what it looks like in the virtual world, right? So here we are, and you'll notice we have the departure to the tool, the automated tool, and to the AI system, and to the data dashboard happening on that board in the back. We also have pieces and like a tabletop version sitting there on the table. We have books around the library that students can click on to bring up strategy and tactics and even science fiction and all kinds of imaginative ways of thinking about the problem space. And then outside, we have a large map that you can stand on and interact with and do things with, right? And of course, I'm thinking of additional. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
That's right. Yeah, I was going to say, sorry to interject.
No,
yeah,
you're good.
Like your idea is fantastic. Like it would be nice if we, from that on the ground map, you can actually immerse yourself in those, the territories in where the wolves are released or not released.
Absolutely. So yeah, speaking of the wolves, let me move ahead. I'm checking the time. We're good on time. We've got another 13 minutes. So there's another view of the room. And of course, if I click the speakeasy, and it will talk about some of this little box text you see with the little chat bubble on the slide. We love comics, and we love ways of pulling people into all this content. The pros and cons that you see appearing in the speakeasy, that's part of the ChatGPT part, where we're talking to the Red Queen. That's our metaphor for our Da Vinci version, and getting responses. And our goal is to harvest and to store and buffer and train that. We don't want these to be one-shot prompts where you ask it questions, you get answers, but the answers are not relevant to where you're going with this complex problem. So that's one of the reasons we are doing this ourselves, why we have our own 39 templates and ways of managing this. We are running a public version. If you want to try it out, you certainly can. And then I think Dr. Stricker is planning on working with various groups to offer a subscription service in the future. I don't know if we'll do that, but I think we had people ask us about it, and that's the only reason that's there. So let's see, for the Matrix game, what is the umpire doing? Let's take a look. There's the umpire, who's of course making decisions on the strategy and the value of the contributions, because we can't just have contributions without a sense of relevance and utility, right? How useful is that? We have the teams and their input and their gameplay, the database reporting. And years ago, I know you're probably thinking, well, that's all fine and good, but what if you were migrating this to VR, because we do that. Many of you know that. We'll take our work from the virtual world, from Second Life or OpenSim. We will port the mesh into Unity, right? And then we will generate. We have an a VR app on the Meta Store right now that's in beta, and we then evaluate that the usability of it, right? And then the integration. And I just want you, for those of you who are wondering which is better, let's answer that question for just a moment and reflect on it. I love these worlds better, the virtual world, and here's why. I can have 2 terabytes of content in here and more rich experiences, more people, more stuff, right? I can have a multiplayer game with 20 to 40 people, and I can have fun. In VR, that's not as easy to do. First off, that VR app, if you're using the Meta product or the Oculus Quest 2, that's a phone app. That's an Android app on your face, right? And it's going to have limits on its storage, its performance, its interaction, the number of players. All of these are constraints that for an educator are critical, because I don't know about you, but my classes all have 20 people or more, right? And so I need everyone to be supported, not just, 3 or 4 friends. Anyway, just some thoughts. I just want to throw that out there. But I am a fan. Many of you know I started life in 1995 through 97 as a VR researcher. And of course, I'm always thinking about how to augment the immersive experience. So I do think in this integrated fashion. So here, these are just notes from Dr. Stricker on what you see with this tabletop here and the gameplay and how we interact with it, how each of the roles would participate, right? And of course, if you were running this without all our devices, you would run it conversationally, right? Which would be amazing. Now, let's move on. Let's move past all of this. Here's an example of the outside where you're standing on the map and you're working with all these pieces, right? And we call this the Matrix game played in a virtual world. This is on Virtual Harmony, where we're currently playing it. And this happens to be as part of our planetarium grid. There is a copy of this at OSCC, just so you know, in case you ever wanted to mess with it. Okay, so let's take a look at wolves. So if we were going to apply these same tactics with our game to the question of where should we put wolves if we seed them back into the U.S., where do they go, right? And how do communities feel about this? Okay, one position takes the perspective that wolves should be guaranteed a place in the natural world to protect biodiversity, which is important in our ecosystem. We recognize that. But then there's some other thoughts here too. And this is, you have to zoom in really close to see this. So I took all these words and put them in the note card for you. And if you didn't get a copy of the note card, just send me a text message and I'll certainly send you one. Or you can send it to Frankie too, because we both have that. And the note card's what you're seeing on this speakeasy, just so you have a record of it. But anyway, we know that we want safe communities. We don't want, if you're running a farm, you don't want your animals to be eaten. You don't want your pets to be eaten. You don't want your children or your family or your friends, your community. So you want everything to be safe, yet you're trying to be equitable, right? Trying to figure out, how do we do this? And is this the right thing to do? And where is it the right thing to do? And so these kinds of complex problems, I guess I would characterize this as complicated because we do have answers, but we're not going to be happy with any of them, are we? Because someone somewhere is going to feel disadvantaged by the decision. It's just probably going to happen unless we find a very remote location.
There are consequences, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I was thinking for a moment, because I have a colleague that I work with who was walking his dog out in Palmer Park, kind of a pass in Colorado. I'm in Colorado, and a mountain lion came up and started to eat his dog, right? He has a big dog, attacked him. It was David Leisure. And he was studying kickboxing, and he kicked the mountain lion, right? And it knocked him back, and the mountain lion ran off. And he probably hurt it just a little bit. If we were doing D&D, we'd say it had 2 hit points of damage, okay? A little stun damage, but nothing unrecoverable. However, the park ranger fussed at him because you've attacked an endangered species, right? And of course, he's thinking, well, he was going to eat my dog and possibly me, and it's not a good thing. So how do we resolve these kinds of conflicts? That's what we're talking about here. Let's move to the next slide. So you see some more about Team A and Team B. And on this one, you will notice there's all these segments on reasoning and the different rebuttals, the different progressive information that you would provide. This reminds me of debate team. I was on a debate team in high school, and I would often have to take a position that was not mine. In other words, to defend a perspective that was not mine. I didn't share anything in common. It might have been against my ethics, my morals, or how I view the world at large. But seeing the world from someone else's eyes is an amazing experience. It's very illuminating from an educational perspective. Did you have something to add there, Frankie?
No.
Let's go to the next one, because I don't have any speakeasy for this one, so I will catch up on the old speakeasy, and we'll just take a look, because this is what's happening when you have the blue and green teams offering their information, right? And you start scoring, you start thinking about the value of what they're offering. The umpire, there's some handicap reasoning, so you can kind of see how this information is flowing. And of course, it's going into a database because we're all about analyzing the value. Oops, I'm already thanking ourselves. Oh my gosh, I'm getting to the end. I better slow down on the speakeasy.
We have 8 minutes left.
Yeah, but that's right. I forgot we had 50. I thought we had 45. But we want to open the floor for questions. So let me go ahead and say interactively, do you have any questions as we go through these last 2 slides here, last 3 slides? These are what's interactively happening in the dashboard, bringing in the AI content for the pros and cons. You see that on the right, and I know it's a little hard to read, right? But it's talking about the wolves in the countryside and their biodiversity on the first section, on the pros, right? They don't want the numbers to get too high, so there has to be this eco-balance, right? The cons are, of course, the problems that may occur, the danger to humans, the ecological problems, and then anytime you inject a species back into an environment after it's been gone for a while, what are the effects of that? And there's a lot of science that has to go into these kinds of decisions. It can't just be an emotional response, right?
That's right.
Well, as we move towards the end of the matrix talking about it, why don't we talk about some of our other games? Because we run many games in the virtual world. We run games for character strengths, and this bridges with an immersive experience that's going to be offered after the conference by Wisdom Seeker, Lisenna. And that's where we think about, I hear someone's microphone. Let me know if you want to talk. That's where we think about responses to a survey. How many of you have taken the character strength survey in the audience? Please let us know. You'll want to do it before you go to that event. Anyone?
Character strengths, there a link?
Yeah, it's signature character strengths. We'll get them the link. The survey takes about 15 minutes to do, and it is wonderful. It's part of research that has over 1 million respondents. So from an education perspective, and of course it talks about your 24 strengths, and your top 5 are your signature ones. They're your go-to strengths when the chips are down, when COVID hits, when you're feeling like you need insights or uplift or something to really strengthen your spirit. Well, we run a game about that in the virtual world. Yeah, well, you don't, because there are 24 strengths, and what they're doing is ordering them, and then they give you a little write-up. They give you a PDF, and you want to save that. And over time, you might want to take the survey again and see if your strengths have changed. I was shocked at mine. My top one was, I think, teamwork. Then there was honesty. Honesty is not a surprise, but teamwork was, because I was the kid in school who had to have an A, so I would run over my poor teams and constantly take on all the work. You may have noticed that during this talk, right? And I love teams now. In life, teams make us stronger, right? We can get more done. We have the value of all this diverse capability. my teams inspire me, and Frankie and Spin, Ubit, and of course Algernon, JJ, and of course Skylark, all of our teammates, and of course Delightful, who's not with us anymore. But anyway, we run a game for signature character strengths where we think about team building, we think about evaluating each other's strengths and saying, how strongly do you think that person embodies that? And I think that's part of what Wisdom Seeker is going to be covering, so I'm not going to talk any further on that. But she came out and played our game and then created her own. So I love the fact that we bridge as a community and strengthen one another. Other games we do, we have a live pinball game where you can get inside and play, and you're like Tron, you're like one of the pieces.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And then of course we have a carnival with all the carnival games, including a pinball machine that you're physically standing in front of playing with, and so you can play with that. Then we also have a lot of thinking games, and we have some action games. We of course have the Mars expedition where you have 6 levels to the game, and you're trying to get through from Earth to the space station, from the space station to Mars, and then of course through all the levels to try to figure out how can we make Mars a breathable, living planet, a place where we can actually exist, right? And we have others too, But anyway, let me look and see if we have questions. Yes, Delightful Duwangle. We were all very close. She and Frankie were best friends. Delightful was the sister of my heart. I was her research mentor for her doctoral degree. And then we did game design cruises to Cozumel with Microsoft and Electronic Arts, speaking about how we use game design in education. And we spoke at so many conferences. And we, of course, published 2 books with Delightful, as our co-editor. Thank you, Agile Bill. It's great to see you. We're sorry that Spinoza couldn't be here today because he's the one who, of course, did the coding. He wrote 5,000 lines of code for our AI system for integrating it with this. So that's why I don't take you through that. Bye, Katie. Thank you. You have a great conference. So it's a little bit of work. They always make it sound easy, like ChatGPT will write the code for you and you'll be all done with it. That's not really how it works if you want it to work well, in my opinion. We, of course, asked it to, and then we kind of chuckled at the results, okay? Because, of course, we wanted it to behave in specific ways. Plus, some of our educators at the Air University, they needed a hands-free solution. So they needed voice apps written for Alexa, for example, to talk to it while they're playing these games and interact. Well, thank you, Frankie. Thank you, team. And I do want to thank our conference hosts and everyone who's made this possible. And thank you, Phelan, and the organizing team. We know how much work it is to put on a conference, and we are thankful. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you.
I think this is the first time in history that I've ended a couple minutes early. Out of 435 talks, Renee, if you want to be friends, please, Hubert laughing because he's right. Yeah, if you want to be friends, and you don't have to be, but 17 other people thought it was a good idea. So, you're welcome to join our community. Yeah, keep in touch. Let us know. And we'll go ahead and let the next, I think the next session is the Linden session. So you want to get a good seat. That's why everyone's leaving like quickly. And me, I have to run to class, right? I'm teaching scripting for non-programmers.
Oh my, that'll be nice.
And yes, I have a human-computer interaction class that I took into the virtual world, and so I'm making them do everything in here. Yeah. Well, Unity does too, because of course, when you create mesh content in here, if you create with the idea in mind that you're prototyping here and you're going to use there, then you can minimize your workload. You start thinking about your workflow. Hey, Eva, thank you for the friendship. That's wonderful. Day, it's so good to see you. And Day has written some apps and some cool, I don't know if they're games or educational simulations, but it's just amazing stuff. I want to put a shout out to Day and his Science Circle stuff. I'm a member of the Science Circle also.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Yeah, it's wonderful. Well, thank you. Go get a good seat.
Will do.
Oh, thank you, Day. I'll be back to the conference. I just have to go teach an hour class, and then I will be back. See you later.
We'll keep you safe for you.
And thanks, Frankie. That was amazing. We stepped in when Spin couldn't talk, by the way. That's a good team.
Sorry, I did not do that.
No, it was great. I loved it. Let me see if anyone needed a
the note cards?
The note card. Just looking real quick. Oh, I see one person's using the Unreal Engine. That's great.
Oh, wow.
Ah, yes. Let's see.
Tough to find out.
Had some lovely feedback, and thank you. We'll have fun, and great. Awesome. We're all set then.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll be back later.
Okay, good. A good class.